It is the summer of 1959, and a 12-year-old boy in suburban Illinois is sitting at the kitchen table with the Sears Roebuck catalogue open in front of him. He has already looked at the bicycles. He has already looked at the baseball equipment. And now he is staring at something on page 47 that he cannot quite believe. Between an advertisement for a portable transistor radio and a display of hunting boots, there is a rifle. Not just any rifle. A full-length, 8-shot semi-automatic military rifle. The same weapon that American soldiers carried ashore at Guadalcanal, that rangers clutched climbing the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, that General George S. Patton himself called, in a letter to Army Chief of Staff George Marshall, the greatest battle implement ever devised by man. The price is $8.95, free delivery to the nearest Sears store. The boy shows his father. His father nods, pulls out his wallet, and fills in the order form. This transaction, and hundreds of thousands like it across every state in the Union, represents one of the most extraordinary episodes in the history of American commerce. The M1 Garand rifle, the weapon that armed the United States Army through the bloodiest conflict in human history, was being sold through a mail-order catalogue to suburban families for less than the price of a decent pair of work boots. It was legal, it was encouraged, and it lasted for nearly a decade before the law of 1968 brought it to an abrupt and permanent end. This is the full story of 15 million M1 Garand rifles, where they came from, who built them, how they fought, and what happened when America decided it was finished selling its own history. To understand how 15 million rifles ended up in a catalogue, one must first understand the crisis that created them. In the years immediately following America's entry into the Second World War in December 1941, the United States Army faced an infantry weapons problem of staggering proportions. The standard Allied infantry rifle of the First World War, the bolt-action Springfield M1 1903, was a fine weapon by the standards of 1917. By the standards of 1942, against an enemy already equipped with semi-automatic and automatic weapons at every level of infantry organisation, it was dangerously inadequate. The arithmetic of bolt action versus semi-automatic fire is simple and brutal. A trained soldier with a bolt-action rifle can fire approximately 15 aimed rounds per minute, under ideal conditions. A soldier with a semi-automatic rifle firing the same cartridge can fire between 30 and 40 aimed rounds per minute, more than double the volume, without any degradation in accuracy. In a firefight measured in seconds and meters, that difference was not a tactical advantage. It was the difference between living and dying. The United States Army had recognized this problem as early as 1919, when the Ordnance Department began soliciting designs for a semi-automatic infantry rifle to replace the Springfield. The process was agonizing in its slowness. Designer after designer submitted proposals. Trials after trials were conducted at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts and at Aberdeen. Proving ground in Maryland. Weapons by Peterson, by Thompson, by Browning, by Garand himself in multiple competing designs were tested, modified, rejected and retested across nearly 2 decades of bureaucratic inertia and budgetary constraint. The existing stopgap solutions were inadequate in different ways. The Springfield M1903 remained in production and in service throughout the war, simply because there was nothing else available in sufficient quantities. The Winchester M1 carbine, lighter and handier, was excellent for support troops, but lacked the range and hitting power required for the frontline infantry role. The Browning automatic rifle provided squad-level automatic fire, but was too heavy at 7.25 kilograms for universal issue. What was needed was a single weapon that could replace the Springfield across the entire infantry, that any soldier of any size and strength could carry and fire effectively. That was mechanically reliable in every climate from Arctic tundra to Pacific jungle, and that could be manufactured in the tens of millions by an industrial base that was simultaneously producing tanks, aircraft, ships, and every other instrument of modern warfare. The challenge, in short, appeared impossible, and then John Cantius Garand solved it. John Garand was a Canadian-born designer who had joined Springfield Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1919. The same year, the Ordnance Department began its search for a semi-automatic infantry rifle. He would spend the next 17 years at the armory, refining and rebuilding his design through test after test, modification after modification, with a patience and precision that his colleagues found both admirable and occasionally maddening. The weapon that emerged from those 17 years of work and was formally adopted as the United States rifle, caliber .30, M1 on January 9, 1936, was a gas-operated, semi-automatic rifle of elegant mechanical simplicity. When a round was fired, a portion of the propellant gas was tapped through a port drilled in the barrel approximately 53 centimetres from the breech, driving a piston rearward against a long operating rod that rotated and unlocked the bolt, ejected the spent case, cocked the hammer, and chambered the next round, all in the fraction of a second between the bullet leaving the muzzle and the shooter's eye returning to the sight picture. The entire cycle required no manual intervention whatsoever. The weapon measured 110 centimetres from muzzle to butt plate, slightly shorter than the Springfield M1903 it replaced, and weighed 4.37 kilograms unloaded, rising to approximately 4.9 kilograms with its 8-round on-block clip of .30-06 Springfield ammunition seated in the magazine. That on-block clip, a stamped steel carrier holding 8 cartridges that fed directly into the fixed magazine and was ejected automatically with a distinctive metallic ping when the last round was fired, became the M1's most recognisable mechanical characteristic, and the source of both its greatest tactical advantage and its most persistent tactical criticism. Springfield Armory in Massachusetts produced the first service M1 Garands in 1937, initially at the modest rate of 10 rifles per day, as production tooling was refined and the manufacturing process was optimised. By the time America entered the war in December 1941, approximately 600,000 M1s had been produced, far short of the Army's requirements, but sufficient to equip the regular Army formations that would form the core of the expanded wartime force. Winchester, repeating arms in New Haven, Connecticut, became the second primary contractor in 1940, and wartime production eventually spread to International Harvester in Evansville, Indiana, and to the Harrington and Richardson Arms Company in Worcester, Massachusetts. At peak wartime production in 1943 and 1944, the combined output of all manufacturers reached approximately 4,000 rifles per day, one complete M1 Garand every 21 seconds of every working hour. Total production across the Second World War reached approximately 5.4 million rifles. Continued production through the Korean War and into the mid-1950s brought the overall total to approximately 5.4 million M1 Garands produced in the United States. A figure sometimes inflated in popular accounts to 15 million when Allied nation production under license and post-war manufacture for export are included, though American domestic production figures are well documented and verified. In combat, the M1 Garand transformed American infantry tactics in ways that even its most optimistic advocates had not fully predicted. On the beaches of the Pacific, in the hedgerows of Normandy, in the frozen wastes of the Chosin Reservoir, American soldiers armed with semi-automatic rifles delivered a volume of fire that consistently astonished their enemies and their allies alike. On Guadalcanal, in August 1942, Marine raiders armed with M1 Garands engaged Japanese infantry in night fighting of extraordinary ferocity, the semi-automatic fire allowing individual Marines to engage multiple targets in the darkness without losing their firing position to work a bolt. Veterans of the campaign consistently cited the Garand's rate of fire as the decisive tactical factor in engagements where Japanese soldiers had expected the slower rhythms of bolt-action opposition. On June 6, 1944, soldiers of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions carried M1 Garands onto the killing ground of Omaha Beach, firing from the surf and from behind German obstacles at positions in the bluffs above that should, by any rational military calculus, have been impregnable. That they were not impregnable, that American soldiers reached those bluffs and cleared those positions, was the result of many factors. The volume of semi-automatic fire from M1 Garands was not the least of them. In the Pacific Island campaigns, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the Garand's .30-06 cartridge proved capable of penetrating the timber and coral construction of Japanese bunkers at ranges where lighter calibers failed. Veterans of these campaigns described the weapon with a consistency and warmth that bordered on affection, unusual for soldiers speaking of military equipment. It worked. In mud, in salt water, in coral dust, in Arctic cold, it worked. Now, if you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know.
The German Army's standard infantry rifle throughout the Second World War was the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action Mauser of superb accuracy and mechanical quality, but fundamentally limited by its manual action to the same 15 rounds per minute ceiling as the Springfield it effectively mirrored in tactical role. German infantry doctrine attempted to compensate for this limitation by issuing MG-34 and MG-42 machine guns at squad level, creating a fire superiority through volume that individual bolt-action rifles could not provide. American infantry doctrine, by contrast, placed semi-automatic fire capability in the hands of every rifleman, creating a distributed, decentralized fire superiority that German tactical planners found genuinely difficult to counter. Captured German officers interrogated after the Normandy campaign consistently noted the volume of American small arms fire as a source of tactical surprise. Several accounts describe German soldiers assuming they were facing automatic weapons, when the fire they were receiving was simply 8 American soldiers with M1 Garands firing at their natural semi-automatic cadence. The British Lee Enfield No. 4 rifle, whilst a bolt-action design, partially compensated through its 10-round magazine, larger than the German 5-round Mauser, and the famously rapid bolt manipulation that British and Commonwealth soldiers drilled to the point of near automaticity. A trained Lee Enfield firer could achieve rates approaching 25 rounds per minute in ideal conditions, faster than the Mauser, but still significantly below the Garand's practical rate. The Soviet Mosin Nagant remained a 5-round bolt-action rifle throughout the war, its limitations offset in Soviet tactical doctrine by sheer weight of numbers, and the PPSH-41 submachine gun issued to assault formations. The Japanese Arisaka Type 99, the Italian Carcano, the French MAS-36, all bolt-action designs, all fundamentally outclassed in rate of fire by the American weapon they faced across the world's battlefields. No major combatant nation of the Second World War successfully fielded a semi-automatic rifle in comparable quantities to the M1 Garand. The German Gewehr 43, produced in modest numbers from 1943, was a capable semi-automatic design but reached the front in quantities, approximately 402,000, that precluded the universal issue the Americans had achieved years earlier. The Korean War of 1950 to 1953 demonstrated both the Garand's continuing relevance and the limits of its design. American soldiers on the frozen ridgelines of the Korean peninsula found the M1's reliability in extreme cold to be exceptional, the gas-operated mechanism functioning in temperatures that caused lesser weapons to fail. The weapon's .30-06 cartridge retained lethal energy at ranges that the intermediate cartridges of newer designs could not match, and the 8-round en-bloc clip, whilst limiting in capacity compared to the 30-round detachable magazines of the Soviet weapons facing it, proved sufficiently adequate for the defensive battles that characterized much of the Korean conflict. By the late 1950s, with the M14 rifle entering development and the Army beginning the long transition to a new standard infantry weapon, the M1 Garand began its transition from active service weapon to surplus commodity. Arsenals at Springfield, at Rock Island in Illinois, at Anniston in Alabama, at Red River in Texas, began accumulating M1 Garands in quantities that filled warehouses and strained storage budgets. The civilian marksmanship program, operating under the auspices of the Army, began channeling weapons into the civilian market, and Sears Roebuck, the great American retail institution whose catalog reached into every corner of the country, became the most prominent retail face of that process. The $8.95 price point, representing a fraction of the weapon's manufacturing cost and a tiny fraction of what a commercial sporting rifle of equivalent quality would have cost, was not a promotional gimmick. It was the honest arithmetic of surplus, a weapon the government could not store indefinitely, priced to move, offered through the most trusted retail channel in American consumer life. Then came the autumn of 1968, and with it, the end of everything that the Sears catalog page represented. The Gun Control Act, signed by President Lyndon Johnson on October 22, 1968, did not single out the M1 Garand. It did not need to. Its provisions, ending mail-order firearms sales, imposing comprehensive dealer licensing requirements, restricting the importation of surplus military weapons, dismantled the entire infrastructure through which rifles like the Garand had reached civilian hands with the efficiency and reach of a national retail institution behind them. The Sears catalog page disappeared. The order forms were pulped. The rifles already delivered stayed where they were, in the legal possession of the people who had bought them. But no new ones would follow through that channel. The civilian marksmanship program itself survived the 1968 Act, restructured and operating under tighter oversight, and continues to this day, distributing M1 Garands to eligible civilians through a regulated application process. A standard field-grade M1 Garand through the current CMP program costs between $650 and $1,050 depending on condition, a figure that transforms the $8.95 Sears purchase into something that looks, across the distance of 60 years, rather like the transaction of the century. On the open collector market, original unaltered M1 Garands in excellent condition command between $1,200 and $2,500. Winchester produced examples, IBM produced examples, and early Springfield Armory production rifles with matching components reach considerably higher. The rifle that a working family bought from a catalog for the cost of a restaurant meal is now a significant investment. Return, then, to that boy at the kitchen table in suburban Illinois, staring at page 47 of the Sears Roebuck catalog. He does not know that the rifle his father is about to order carried men across the beaches of Normandy. He does not know that it silenced machine gun nests on Okinawa and held frozen ridgelines in Korea. He does not know that within 9 years the law will make this casual transaction impossible, and that within 60 years the rifle will be worth 100 times what his father paid for it. He knows only that it is $8.95, and that his father is already reaching for his wallet. 15 million M1 Garands were built. They served in 3 wars. They won a world. They hung in catalog pages and stood behind shop counters and sat in the gun cabinets of ordinary American families from Maine to California. And then the law changed, and they became something else. Artifacts, collectibles, pieces of the most consequential conflict in human history, available now only through regulated channels at prices that would have seemed fantastical to the boy at the kitchen table. General Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised by man. He was not given to understatement, and on this occasion, the evidence of 3 wars and 15 million rifles suggests he was not wrong.